Good morning, everybody. It's August 6th, 6 o'clock in the morning in Arizona, in the fascinating, fabulous, yes, I'm being goofy, the city of, how am I going to put it? The Temple of the Phoenix, the Rising. You know, this is a message from Gaia's Empowerment Center. Yes, I am Clint Starr. Now, Gaia's Empowerment Center basically means respecting the earth, stewardship of the earth. That's basically what Gaia's Empowerment Center is. It's being stewardship of the earth. Basically saying, can we take care of the earth so for our long-term adventures? Now, why is this important? Well, if you keep a dirty house, what happens? You get fat, you get upper respiratory infections, and your body starts forming all kinds of weird anomalies, and you get bugs all over the place. But if you take care of it, do basic maintenance, clean it up once a week, take out the trash and do your laundry once in a while. You do your laundry when needed. And you maintain the dishes. That means you don't get mold, you don't get strange bugs flying all over the place, and your health actually improves significantly. So basically, it's logic. And yeah, there is a lot of spiritual stuff into it, which can be easily used, which can be mathematically calculated. I mean, we got, ancient geometry or something like that, where it talks about multiple different dimensions and densities, which is all true science. And if you're talking about dimensions, then you're also talking about entities in these dimensions. And since science is a really bad understanding of one of my favorite games, telephone, where you get a group of people, you put them in a circle, you tell one person a story, and you have that go all the way around the circle until the end, and then that person tells what they heard. So you have the original story, and then you have the current story, which is where rumors get spread, which is how parts of the stories change, because the person might be thinking candy, and you're talking about a disease. So now the disease has a candy name to it. So it could be like, I went to the store to buy some candy and get a Band-Aid for my cut. And by the time it goes around 20 people, I went to the emergency room because I had Mars Milky Way candy bar shoved into my leg, causing a severe infection. Make sense? So now let's apply that to our country. Well, when the people fear the government, you have tyranny. When the government fears the people, you have freedom. When you have the First Amendment, which is about communication, so people can communicate and express thoughts and ideas without a religious dictator, without some religion or some agency putting a bullet in your head or imprisoning you. Which is the reason why Christians hate the First Amendment. Actually, it's pretty funny that Christians are actually complaining about defending the Constitution, because they're the reason why we have it. I mean, when was the last time a Christian was burning people at the stake for what? Witchcraft? Which magic is real, and I've already explained to what it is. Because if there's fifth dimension, sixth dimension, whatever, that means there's entities in there. Now, for CERN, yes, that circular particle accelerator in Europe, they were opening up portals, they were opening up all this stuff, which is typical, normal science. Because you don't know. You don't know what you don't know unless you jump, unless you do it. What I find fascinating is that since that thing has been up, those people feel like they have wasted their entire lives. They can't remember, they haven't been able to dream, and the entire area has had a dark cloud aura type sensation to it. Which makes sense because you're breaking apart the fabric of 3D reality, of our realm of reality. Now, it's very complicated, yes, I understand I'm using strange words and you want to call me all kinds of stuff, but take in consideration that the entire concept and reason for America to be a country in the first place is to promote conscious evolution. Basically meaning you gotta get your brain working, you gotta get the cobwebs up, you gotta get your elbows greased, up, and then you gotta go, readjust your spine so you can stand up properly and take charge, or make good decisions. And you gotta have the feet to move in the direction of your abilities. So why is all this important? Well, CERN, whether they admit it or not, actually has particles that are from different dimensions. They have actually opened up, and there's a lot of other research and stuff like this. They're usually affiliated with the CIA and other stuff of that nature because they want to do secret things on mind control, on spying on Americans. Which brings me back to freedom. Well, we need, freedom pretty much means you die on your feet. That's basically what freedom means. You're free to think what you can do, you're free to make decisions, and you're free to hold government accountable. Because remember, when the government fears the people, you have freedom, which is the reason why we have the Second Amendment. And if you listen to government, they completely ignore that because cowards work for the government, because they can't handle freedom. They can't handle thinking for themselves, which is group mentality. You form an organization, you come up with a standard code, a standard model, standard way of processing, which means you have standard weights, standard fitness, standard this, standard that, which strips away the entire concept of what it means to be human. You're taking away all of that. You're literally violating the Constitution by definition. And when people choose fear over respect, integrity, and growth mindset, then that's why you get an 80% vaccination rate amongst the citizens who have never did anything to keep the government small, which is the reason why of the purpose of this conversation. Because back when I was a kid, obviously, everyone was a kid, but when I was in boarding school, for example, my teacher was talking about, the Bill of Rights, how America got started, the Lewis and Clark exploration from coast to coast, and all the cool bells and whistles in between. And why we're a country. We got let's break down the intellect. Let's break down the intellect. All right, we got Socrates and we got Jesus, two really well-known teachers. One has more of a mystical, divine origin, ideology, thought process, whatever. But they both were promoting. They were both Socrates was talking about I can never remember this. Jesus talked about the kingdom of heaven is in your heart, which means if you balance out your heart and mind, then that way you have found peace between your heart and mind. Unexamined life. Socrates was famous for one of his things as the unexamined life. And people hated him because he's always questioning, because he didn't know. He didn't know. I mean, this was 400 BC. 400 before the J dude got publicly executed on a stick for government funding belief systems. So we got two people that were their crew, two people and crew. One of the crews defended him, wanted Socrates to live, and actually provided an escape plan so he can get the fuck out of town and go somewhere else for the rest of his life. The J dude, somebody in his team ratted him out for less than 6 months of pay. For less than 6 months of an average salary. And I'll call that guy Cody. And obviously, he had a ritualistic blood sacrifice because he so-called died for our sins, which is propaganda. Because now they're telling us that now the church is saying you are sinful because of whatever. You have to be forgiven for this. Well, that doesn't make sense. Especially since one is government bossing you around, and the other one is saying, hey, we need you to think. So now we have Socrates teaching people how to think, and actually of going after some analysis, I actually have his type of mentality. Because I will talk to somebody, ask them like 3 or 4 different questions, which is what I've always done my entire life, especially in school. Teachers either A, develop confidence because they know that I'm questioning them and that keeps them on their toes and they like that, or B, they've been doing the work so long and they're just super annoyed by what they're just going through the motions of the ocean, so to speak. And they don't really care. They don't really want to educate. They just say, hey, you got to learn this so you can get this, which isn't learning. Now, the teachers that enjoy me asking questions, that's learning. And then when you see their face expressions change because they're like, whoa, you're right, that doesn't make sense. You can see the brain, you can see the gears clicking, which is the reason why you're going to school anyways. You don't need to go to school for propaganda. You want to go to school because you want to learn what you want to learn. So I'm getting kind of off topic, but this is all kind of a big issue. Because if the country cannot think for themselves and is too scared to make any decision without some authority telling them what to do, then that's why you get stuff like the government lockdown, the chaos of 2020. That's why we had a first husband and a black guy and a Muslim black guy. Yeah, I'm talking about the Obama people. Nobody protested it. Nobody did anything. You're being forced to buy health care. All people did was talk crap. No one said this. People were saying this is unconstitutional, but nobody did anything. The judges didn't do anything. The citizens just talked and talked and talked like they always do. And the evening news, well, the thing about socialism and communism is that that's where you get your information, from the talking heads on TV. And they know how to, they'll be like, hey, some guy was doing X, Y, Z, and they give you just a hint, and then they say, oh, and for the next news up, then they go, So they kind of give you a dissonant, a disconnecting theory, but they structure the sentence in a form where you go, oh, I know how they did it. So so they give you the illusion of intelligence. The guy was found on the other side of a cliff. Next you know, you got someone in the hospital. Oh, well, he jumped off the cliff. Well, you hear the story, he got ran over by a train. Just that kind of stuff. This is what I'm trying to get to, is ways of processing information, ways of being strong and tough. Because fear is pointless. Fear is a disease. Fear doesn't involve thinking. Fear doesn't involve research. And fear is just there for some coward to control others. That guy's the bad guy. These are the reason why he's the bad guy. It's all his fault. It's all his fault. It's all his fault. Which is what they did with Trump, Donald Trump. Typical, classic, normal. Now, I started the video with the math. The math of freedom and the math of tyranny, and the decay rate and the growth rate of it. Well, I'll kind of give you some hints on how to establish that. Is the information that you're gathering, is it promoting fear, which keeps you limited, weak, and small-minded? Or is it promoting bravery and freedom, saying, hey, we can do this, we can do this? Perfect example. Perfect example is JFK and the mission to the moon. He said, yeah, it's going to be hard. He says, yeah, it's going to be a pain in the ass, but we're doing it because we can. We're doing it because we're American. We're doing it because we want to know. We want to explore. And NASA did an experiment on 1,600 kids from 5 to 6, from 3 to 5, and they were all classified as creative geniuses, which means they would have been able to get a NASA job one of the good NASA jobs. And then they talked about, and then the research says that at about 10 years old, 30% drop off, and it's all school related, because school doesn't teach people to think. It's plug and chug. It doesn't teach people to think, doesn't teach people how to process information, which is horrible. But then again, when the government forces you to do stuff and you don't fight back, that means that causes an irritation on your soul. It causes an infection type thing, a disease, because you're disassociating. You're not allowing your cells, you're not allowing your brain, you're not allowing the freedom of flow of energy to go through. You're using fear, which blocks you, which causes obesity, which causes mental illnesses, especially when you're being lied to. When things fuck with your head, it changes your brain chemistry. See, this is all what happens when you process information. When you ask questions, you come up with these conclusions. When you do your homework, that's what happens. Now, back in 95, 97 or whatever, when I was in the boarding schools, and this was I didn't go back to public school until about 8th grade. And then, in these schools, I was like, okay, well, the teacher's talking about all the cool stuff about America and the Bill of Rights and why we have each amendment and why we have the Declaration of Independence and stuff of that nature. The Declaration of Independence, if you were to read it, it's saying, hey, it's telling a government, we do not appreciate these following things. We are being nice about it. We do not want to be taxed. We don't want to be infringed. We don't want to be harassed. We don't want this. We don't want that. And we don't want this. Now, the U.S. government is doing exactly that. Well, we told the British Empire, the first nation to break free. In fact, we weren't even a country. We were an idea when we broke free. And when we broke free on a land that was fresh, has not been contaminated with buildings, with government, with toxins, with poisons. There wasn't any E. coli breakout because the plumbing system was all wrong, like they had in the European countries. I think it was E. coli. Anyways, it was some disease that comes in the bowel movements. Now, the ones that are upriver were healthy. The ones that are downriver were sick. The ones that are upriver were more the wealthy, and the ones that were downriver were not so wealthy. But at the time, they weren't inventing stuff, so wealth was different. Here, you can rub two sticks together and form $1 billion company. And then the government gets all excited and go, oh, well, we can tax, which these agencies have no business being there in the first place. But seriously, the entire structure of our country is limited government. So for the ones that are 60 years or older, you've never once defended our country. You've never once stood up to tyranny. You allowed the fear to get into you. But then again, you guys didn't have much resources. But then again, if the Constitution says this is what we're fighting for, this is what we don't want, and you go more towards the tyranny, more towards government instead of freedom. Remember, government only gets bigger when people work for it, when people choose to give it power. All the power is in you. Remember, Jesus and Socrates talked about inner growth. And it was the government that said, hey, they're corrupting the youth. They're getting people to think. Benjamin Franklin and the founding fathers, they did their homework. They know all that. What did Benjamin Franklin do when his brother would put him in the slavery? Because however the dynamics were back then, he said, "Fuck you," and went over to Virginia territory or whatever, and the rest is history. He invents a bunch of stuff. He exercised the mind, and America was founded on intellect, on the ability to work your God-given talent. And I'm not talking about the religious kind. I'm talking about one that's actually known in physics, which is the dimensions, which makes things really fascinating. Because now, instead of fearing a god or a deity, which doesn't make any sense, because why would a deity want you to fear its own creation? Why would an agency want you to fear them? Fear gives control. When the people can think for themselves, that takes control and power away from authorities. Which is why we have the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, and people willfully violate the Constitution by asking government permission to register firearms, getting the government bigger, causing the government only to get bigger and bigger. And then they go, oh, well, we don't want you to overthrow the government. Well, you overthrew the government by the agencies. The country itself dies because of these agencies, because cowards need to feel control. Either A, need to be in control, or to be controlled by others. That's just what fear is. Freedom, on the other hand, says, I don't want to be controlled. I want to be able to sit down, read a book, and process information. Or I want to be able to live my life without government involvement. And the ones that feel the need to boss people around and to stick their nose where it don't belong, peeping Toms, spies, who want to sit on their fat ass, watch a camera, instead of boots on the ground and doing real work. I mean, by definition, all of these unelected, nobody voted for federal agencies, by definition, commit treason, genocide. The act actively hunting and destroying a civilization or culture. So when you're bragging about, oh, I'm the government, I'm from the government, it's my job, it's this and that, you're not representing the American people. And the fact that you want the citizens to fear you means that we're in tyrannical country. So this is kind of the attributes of the math equation. More people working for government, more people fearing the government, more people giving the government power, which takes away from your individuality, which takes away from your personal power, which strips you away from your own God-given talents, your God-given capabilities. Benjamin Franklin, I'm pretty confident he believed in a deity or gods, forces outside of his control, but he wasn't religious. There's a difference between religion and love and God. Armani says, "In God we trust." Actually, it's kind of an insult to the American people because you're trusting God to keep the dollar at a stable rate in comparison to his gold and silver standard, in comparison to the gold standard. Then you hear the government printing out paper, so you're trusting the government to be honest, which is bullshit. And then you got these God-fearing Christians, that got vaccinated. So the Bible itself literally talks about a time where you'll have to be forced to either A, sacrifice your job, or get vaccinated, get the mark of the beast. How many people had to travel, or how many people lost their job because they refused to get the government vaccine? Literally speaking. That's the math of it. It's just math. And you got people saying, hey, they're twisting the truth. They're twisting it. Now the most useful, overused science, I mean, this experiment pops up all the time. Groupthink and individual think. When the people are in a group, they have groupthink. Now they'll have let's say a person, sees a couple items on the list, and they don't realize that the people that are in the same area are paid actors, or whatever it may be. So they'll say, hey, B is the answer, when really it's C. And everybody knows it's blatantly obvious, you can run at numbers, but because people are pack animals and they want to feel liked and appreciated or whatever, they're going to go with the pack mentality, even though it's completely wrong. And that's where the brainwashing attributes come in, which is why those who can read were the ones that were the preachers. Now, is this making sense? Because holding government accountable has always been a conspiracy theory. When it's blatantly obvious that they're violating the Constitution and people don't want to do anything. It's called sweeping problems under the rug. My mom was very good at it. My aunt is very good at it. And my grandma, it's a female-dominated family. And which means their decision-making is flawed. But whatever. So that's what I got to say. You want our country back? You got to find your own balls if you didn't get them cut off with the vaccine.